So I was looking at some of the reactions for the new Madame Web film. It's been getting scathing reviews. Scathing reviews. The worst thing people have ever seen. And it's sort of solidified this notion that I've had for a while now, is there are films that kind of act as a sacrifice. There are sacrificial films being made. What do I mean by that? I mean it in kind of multiple ways. First of all, there are films in the literal sense that are never designed to do well in the first place. There's some sort of tax write-off. There's some sort of funny money being involved. Think of the producers. It's a lot like video games. I think there are movies that are just outright scams in the same way that some video games nowadays are being produced just as outright scams. You know, that Day Before game that came out recently, it was never designed to function. It was just sort of a scheme to get people to dump in a bunch of money and then just run away. Take the bag and run. And I think that there are movies like that as well, where people just put out anything and people will go to see it, and fuck you if it's bad. We got your money anyway, we're taking off. And then again, I think there are movies that are somebody needed to move money somehow in a semi-legal way. Listen, I'm not an economist. I don't know how money works exactly, but I think there are movies where, somebody needed to move some money around somehow, and it wasn't, it didn't really matter so much how good the movie was. Just, that money needed to go somewhere for somebody. But beyond that, what I really mean when I'm thinking of films as a sacrifice is kind of how they exist in the zeitgeist. Every so often there are films like Madame Web or Morbius, and their function in the zeitgeist is they are something for everyone to point at and say, ha ha, look at this idiot, look at this retard. It's something for sections of the internet to gather around as one to point to and say, now see, this is what a bad movie looks like. This is what a really bad movie looks like. Movies like Madame Web or Morbius are sort of an uncontroversial type of bad. The people who are so gleefully pointing out how bad these movies are, they will be at the same time either very wishy-washy or give sort of this sort of hollow praise for movies that are just as bad, really, but they have sort of a larger brand footprint, whether it's the Marvels or whatever other superhero gibberish comes out at the time. It's very sort of controversial to say, I didn't think the Marvels was a very good movie. It's very controversial to say, like, I thought the new Star Wars wasn't very good, because there's all sorts of external socio-political baggage that goes along with it. But movies like Madame Web, again, they exist as a sacrifice. They're something for people who don't really have any sense of what a good or bad movie is to pretend like they do. People who have no real standards about the garbage that they shovel in front of their eyeballs. Movies like Madame Web, they exist to pretend like they do. Like they do have some sort of standard or criteria or discernment. Now, I haven't seen Madame Web. I'm sure it's bad. I'm sure they're correct in that it's a bad movie. But is it any worse than Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness? That was the last Marvel movie that I saw. I saw that one because Sam Raimi directed it. So, sure, I'll check it out. Garbage. Gobbledygook. Is Madame Web any worse than that? I did see Morbius. I saw Morbius, and I was just kind of like confused at the overblown reaction to it. Because to me, when I watched Morbius, it wasn't any better or any worse than the Doctor Strange movie. It wasn't any better or worse than Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. My opinion coming away from Morbius was like, okay, this was a middling superhero movie with some, it was fun in parts. It was mostly, it was just a B movie, a C movie. It wasn't anything remarkable to me as far as like, this is the worst thing ever. This is an affront to good taste. But I think when movies do come out where people have this kind of unified, very sort of knee-jerk, strong reaction, I think it kind of functions as kind of a pressure valve because either they genuinely can't tell the difference between good or bad entertainment, or else they've spent so long sort of couching their words or being wishy-washy about their opinions about these movies because they're afraid of what other people will say or that other people will gang up on them or whatever. I also think there's a kind of shadowy corporate element at play. You know, Madame Web is partially owned by Sony, Morbius as well. I think there's a certain corporate element where these Marvel movies have a certain amount of fake viral enthusiasm going on. Like you pay like some fake bot farm to pump up the sort of reputation of your product, whereas the Sony movies don't have that same amount of manipulation going on behind the scenes, or it's just people responding to brand recognition. Maybe people have a more wishy-washy opinion about the Marvel or the DC movies because they feel a deeper affinity for the brand, whereas they don't feel as close a connection with the Sony thing. I don't know, but I think like part of the sort of unified negative reaction, part of people feeling that they have been permitted to have a negative opinion about this latest iteration of superhero gobbledygook, I think part of it is like some sort of corporate shenanigans, you know, maybe trying to, maybe Marvel or Disney trying to regain the rights to these properties by encouraging sort of a more negative reaction. I don't know. Again, I'm sure Madame Web is not a good movie, but is it unique in that regard? Is it a uniquely bad movie? Probably not. It's probably no better or worse than any other overblown superhero goofball movie from the last 5 years. It's just that this is an instance where people are in some sense given permission to not like it, and so again it becomes sort of a sacrifice, a filmic sacrifice, something for people to rally around, to have a good chuckle at, and that's fine. I have no problem with that, I guess. It just doesn't feel real to me in some sense, I guess. It kind of feels sort of manufactured. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Goodbye.